Hey YouTube. My business, the videos I did about starting up a business or whatever, I have now put into a playlist, so you know. I think I called it Business Startup or whatever. You can look in that if you're looking for the videos from the past couple days or week or so that have to do with starting a business and a couple of things that you might need to know about business. But today I'm going to talk about something that's more related to the Woodmizer than not. And I get pretty many comments and I answer a lot of comments, but I get a whole lot more emails than I do comments. And I just want to talk about one of the biggest things that I get asked when it comes to emails. Alright, so I wanted to grab a straight edge, and I want to explain this to you. One, I don't know if some people don't recognize this or what, but on the Woodmizer, you have a bunk, okay? So what we're looking at here, excuse me, I'm drawing the bunk rails, the top of the rails. And this goes along with pretty much any sawmill, bandsaw mill. Alright, so this is basic geometry, okay? First of all, when you level the sawmill, and why you would not want to level the sawmill, I will never know. You know, why you would want to put the sawmill canted one way, canted the other, or whatever. I mean, it's up to you. You can do what you want. But to me, leveling the sawmill sideways, lengthwise, and every other way, the frame of the sawmill is the way to go. That's what you should do because you can use it to measure from. So anyway, if you look at this representation here, we have a straight line. So we can assume that this sawmill from bunk to bunk is level with one another. Okay? Alright, so here's the thing. When you take a log, let me just draw this here. When you take a log and you put it onto the bunk, now it's not a very big log, I guess. When you put the log onto the bunk, like this, now it doesn't matter whether you put toe boards underneath this or not when you cut it. If you want to put a log down and use no toe boards at all, no boards to shim anything up, you're not worried about, you know, the annual rings and how they run, you can lay this log down there, and if it lays fairly flat, what happens is you can make a cut. But here's what's important here. This Woodmizer saw, and I don't know why, it seems like a lot of people don't understand this. That saw blade that's running around the saw head runs parallel to the bunk rails all of the time, okay? It's designed to run parallel to the bunk rails. So in other words, if this is a foot off of this first rail, it's a foot off of all the rails. Alright, so what does that mean when it comes to cutting a log? Well, let's say you have this, let's say this log isn't quite so straight, and let's say it's more like this. You know, just to give us a little something to look at. So let's say that the log has more of a bend in it, like that. Now, it's down on the bunk here, it's down on the bunk there. So you bring the Woodmizer in here, and you make a cut. Let me just put a little mark here so I know where I'm going to put this. If you make a cut, now let's just suppose that this cut here that I'm making is 10 inches off the bunk, let's say. Alright, so this represents the cut line. I guess I should give myself a little more wood here. This line here with the tick marks on it represents the cut line. So the rest of this is a flitch. So if we take the flitch off of this cut, you end up with a piece that looks like this. Okay, so you end up with this log. Now if I drew that from the side, basically what you have is a piece that looks like that. Okay, the back stops would be over here on the Woodmizer, and basically this is the log. Now here's the thing. Once you make that one cut through the entire log, now I'm not talking about a partial cut, like if the log is up like this and you cut off and you still have more log to cut. I'm talking about when you make a cut through the entire log, that cut that you made, because it's cut by the sawmill, that's parallel to the bunk, that means that the cut is also parallel to the bunk, okay? So when you take that log then that's looking like this, and you flip that upside down, and it looks like this, okay, you just took that and flipped it upside down. When you cut this, whatever cut you make, as long as it goes through the whole log, and I shouldn't, well, let me drop back on that sentence. When you put this cut down on the bunk, and you make another cut through here, the cut you make is parallel to the cut you just made, okay, the previous cut. So in other words, when I take this log and I roll it over, I made a cut here, okay, let me make this a little shorter. Alright, I made a cut here, right here. I rolled the log 180 degrees. When I make my next cut, and I go through this log here, that is going to be parallel to this. So in other words, this log is equal distance all the way down it. So now what you have is you have something that's shaped something like that. Okay? Something like this. Like an old log from the old log cabin days with flat edges. I forget what they call that offhand, but actually it should be like this. Yeah. So you have this flat on top, flat on bottom type of log here. Alright? So this would be the annual rings. So that is parallel to one another. And it's still parallel to the bunk when you lay it down there. Okay? So now here's something where I think people might get mixed up. So let's start over with this and I'll show you something else here. Alright, so you take your bunk rails, okay, there's your bunk rails, and now you're going to put a log on here, and you want to turn the log 90 degrees. Okay, so you put a log back on the Woodmizer, okay, and you make a cut through it. Doesn't matter where the cut is, but you make your cut through there. Okay? Now you have no toe boards on there, and I'm doing that for a reason. There's no toe boards on there. So again, we have a cut that has a flat top on it. Now let's say we take that cut and we turn it to the side. Okay? So now we have it sitting on the Woodmizer like this. Okay? So now we have it sitting sideways here. When you make your cut through here, no matter when you cut your first cut through here, you cut this flitch off the top of this. That cut on the top is still going to be parallel to this bunk. Now this is a 90-degree angle in here after you've done this, hopefully, if you've done it right, when you stood this up against the dog. Okay? So when you turn that log and you cut it, and you cut that 90-degree cut out of there, and you take the flitch off the top of that log. I'm going to draw that bigger. Draw the same thing down here. Okay, just so it's bigger. So now you have this cut like that. You have the dog here, or I mean the adapter. You have your dog against this, and you have your bottom of your bunk rail. from here on in, as long as you use this side and this side to make your next cut, okay, you want to roll this onto one of these flat sides. You are going to have, if you roll it this direction, like let's say we roll it this way and we have this shape, okay, and you cut this, this is parallel to that and it's parallel to the bunk rails. Now this should not be a really hard thing to figure out, but it just seems like a lot of guys get messed up over that. So now we have this cut here, okay, we have this cut, and we're going to take it and roll it again, okay, so I'll draw that with this down, and you have this shape, okay, and now you're going to make another cut to cut the flitch off up here. And when you cut that flitch off, now you have a square cant, and the cant is, when I say square, I mean parallel sides to one another. In other words, this side and this side are parallel, this side and this side are parallel, and parallel means that if it's 8 inches, okay, at this end, it's 8 inches at that end. That's what that means. That's how the Woodmizer, if it's adjusted right and everything, that's how it should be cutting. So I'm not sure of why I get a lot of questions about which way you turn the log. It doesn't really matter which way you turn the log as far as making your cuts, unless you're looking for a particular grain pattern or something. And then we can get into that a little, some other time. But right now, all I'm talking about is the parallel parts of the sawmill. Okay? So the way, again, real quick, the way that works is the bunk rails, when you lay the saw level, you've got the bunks parallel to one another or level to one another. Okay? The bunk rails are all level. The saw head is level. The blade is going to cut level to these. And when you make a cut in the board and you flip it 180 and you make another cut, those cuts in the log are in the log. If you cut a log, okay, we're going to put a log here. Maybe it's this long only. When you make a cut through here and you flop that over onto the cut, when you make another cut, your log is parallel to one another now. It's starting to be a cant. And a cant is simple. It's a square, basically. It can be a rectangle. But basically, whatever the dimensions of the face of the cant are, the cant measurements should be that all the way down to the end. Okay? That's what the cant measurements should be. So if it's 8 by 12, here it's going to be 8 by 12 down this other end as well. I didn't draw that the way I should have, but that's how that would be. It's going to look more like this. Alright, so like I say, I'm hoping that this helps somebody with how the Woodmizer makes level cuts. And when you flop your log over, you don't have to put any toe boards or anything under there. Now, let me show you something else here about the toe boards. And this seems to get guys a little bit confused as well. I'm not sure why. Now let's say you put a log on here, okay? And here you have a toe board. Now I'm going to use an actual board. So I'm going to put maybe I'm going to put a 2x4 on this, okay? Now when I put this 2x4 on here, and this log is laying like that, alright? It's up off this one, but it's on that one. And whatever the reason is why I did this, it could be because the log is bent. Let me draw a little bend into this thing, and then we'll understand this better. So let's say this log has a little bit of a bend in it, okay? A little bit of a bend. Alright, now we want this to be level with, say, this. And I know it doesn't look it, and I'm just making a drawing here. But so what we got here is, now we're making this log fairly level to itself. In other words, it's 10 inches here, it's 10 inches here from the bunk up. I know it doesn't look like it because that's my drawing, but just assume that. Alright, so now when you run the sawmill through that, you run your sawmill down here, your sawmill is going to cut again parallel to the bunk rails. Okay, let me just check that. Your sawmill is going to cut parallel to the bunk rails. Okay, so this, I should use a different colored Sharpie, but my stupid Sharpies are dying on me. I got to get more. So anyway, this is your cut. And if you look at it, it might come out of the top of this circle, but it's into this circle, and that's usually what happens. So now, if you take this and you roll this log on a 90, in other words, if you put the cut to the side like this, you have to readjust your toe board. Your toe board may or may not be right once you turn this cut to make this 90 degrees, when you put the 90 to the side. So when you turn that, you're changing the center of the log is moving, okay? So you have to remeasure this to find out what you need there to be able to make this, you know, a level and make a nice straight cut, depending upon how you want to cut it. But my point is that when you turn away from this face, you need to adjust the toe board. Now, when you go ahead and continue cutting, like let's say you've cut 2 cuts out of this. Alright, so I'm going to draw it down here so it's bigger. So this is our initial one, okay? That's our initial one. We made this cut. Let me just put it here. We made this cut over here. And now, and we had a toe board underneath it, okay? So now, let's see, this cut would have been up. Yeah, we turn it, we measure, see where we want the center of the tree. We put a toe board if we need it, okay? And you're going to make another cut. Once you make that second cut, from here on in, as long as you keep turning it the same direction, which would mean that now you have this kind of a cut, okay? Now that cut's going to look like this, okay? When you roll it, it's going to look like this. So at this point, this is against your backstop. This is now against your backstop. And this is on the bunk rail, okay? Once you turn it and you put the cut side down, you no longer need the toe board, okay? Get rid of the toe board. There's no need for it unless there's something wrong with the log, but here's the problem with that. If you leave the toe board underneath there, this cut will not be parallel to that cut. That's where problems arise. So I would say in most cases you take the toe board out and now you just cut with this log basically down on, or just half of a cant, down on the bunk rail. Okay, so then when you make that cut, so let's make that cut, now you end up with a log that looks like this, where you have it's straight, 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 and you have this, okay? Now, if you turn this way, okay, and if you put the bark down, you may have to use the toe board again, okay? But if you don't put the bark down, once you make 2 cuts, if you put the bark up and you put the cup or the cut down, in other words, there's your bunk rail, something like this would probably look like. Now when you make this cut will be parallel to that cut, and you'll have a square cant or rectangular cant depending upon how you made your other cut, okay? But all you need is the first 2 cuts, this cut and one more cut next to it, and that will automatically keep you with a square cant. Now let me show you something else. If let's say you put the log onto the, let me think about this for a second. Okay, you put the log onto the bunk rail, and you've cut a straight cut up here. Let's say you have a straight cut there. This is rounded. If you turn this all the way around so that this is down, you'll still have a parallel cut. This one and this one, if you make a cut, if you turn this over, in other words, you're going to put the flat part on the bottom, you have the round part on the top, this cut you make will be parallel to that cut, okay? Now, if you have this on a toe board when you make this cut, then when you turn this over to the flat side down, you gotta get rid of the toe board. You don't need the toe board anymore, okay? So you'll be making a cut that looks like this. But if you take that same log and you have a cut here like this log is. Let me just erase that a little bit. Okay, so you have a cut on the top, the flitch is off the top, and you decide to turn that 90, you need a toe board. If you turn it 180, you don't need a toe board, okay? But after you make that second cut, like let's say you turned it 180 and you ended up with this, okay? If you turn this to your next cut, it doesn't matter which way you turn it, you're going to need to have a toe board here, possibly, okay, to adjust for one of these cuts. But you won't need it for two, just one. So as soon as you turn this the other way, and I'll turn it like this, so now I have this, and I have two straight cuts. As soon as I make a cut through here, okay, I'll just go like this to give you an idea of end grain. Once you make your cut through this log, you do not need a toe board anymore on this log, because this, and this are all, these two sides will be parallel to one another, and when you flip this down, okay, which now is like this, okay, you're going to end up with that type of a thing. Now, this will be parallel to this without a toe board, alright? So you'll be making your next cut up there. And that's how you get your either square cant or rectangular cant. Now the reason I say rectangular cant is because we want to try and get as much wood out of the log as we can. So sometimes the log is bent in such a way or shaped in such a way that instead of an 8x8 you can get an 8x12. I've done it a lot of times. I usually shoot for 8x8 because I like 8x8s. I can make siding out of them. If it's pine, if it's anything else, I'll go for the biggest board, the biggest side, the biggest width. But I hope that this helps you to understand, whether you need a toe board or not. And as far as, what type of a toe board, that's up to you. If you want to use a jack, you want to use pieces of wood like I do right now, because I haven't had a chance to make any kind of toe board, and I'm really not interested in it at the moment because I just enjoy doing what I do. I like prying on the log and stuff. It doesn't bother me. So I hope that this helps you to understand, whether you need a toe board or not. When you make your cuts with the Woodmizer, if you cut and you turn that cut down, the next cut will make you a parallel cut with the board the cut you previously made. That's just the nature of the Woodmizer. It cuts straight cuts, okay? And even if the log is bent like this, once you cut it and you roll it over with the flat side down, you don't need any toe board, and this will be flat to one another. I hope you understand that. Guys, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Thanks. Bye.